sunny but chilly morning at the beginning of April, a group of housing designers and providers were invited to a sneak preview of 200 Becontree Avenue in Barking and Dagenham. The tour was led by Mellis, Haward and Buchanan of Archio and Sarah Beth Riley, Associate Architect at BeFirst, the Council's regeneration delivery company, which I'm proud to be a non-exec director, and which was the client for the project.
Welcome to Becontree Estate. I don't know how much people know about it. I think it's a fairly amazing place actually. The kind of headline fact that has always stuck in my mind is that it's the largest public housing estate that's ever been built in the world, and at 101 years old that's still true today. So no pressure as architects coming in to try and add to that. So between 1921 and 1934, the London County Council built 26,000 homes here in Becontree Estate over an area of 10 square kilometres. And I think what's quite interesting about that is that those numbers are not far off what BeFirst and other councils are aiming to build today, although obviously the Becontree Estate was built on green fields, and what we're doing today is having to build within the confines of London. So I think the challenge is very different, and in many ways very much more complex. When they built the Becontree Estate, they had their own railway line bringing materials in, and actually, if you've noticed this double avenue, Becontree Avenue outside, the gap in the middle is actually where the railway line ran. So it's not so much a sort of off-site factory as an on-site factory. This is a 0.15 hectare site, and it's part of the mission that BeFirst and many other councils and local authority housing companies are taking on, which is to deliver affordable homes for their constituents. And so every home matters in that difficult challenge. So the buildings that we're going to show you today are there are 19 affordable rent homes across 2 blocks. The space we're standing in right now is a community space. I think just a sort of headline in terms of density, we're at 120 homes per hectare on this site, and that's around 5 times the density of the surrounding estate, which is about 24 homes per hectare. So it's quite a kind of jump up. And I think what we're going to talk to you about in terms of the design of the scheme is how we've sort of thought about tackling that particular challenge to design something that is very specific to this place and to this community by thinking about how we can tap into the identity of the place, by thinking about how we can deliver what we call a gentle density to maximise the number of homes on site, because that's obviously a very important part of our early brief. Talk about how we're going to deliver homes that people really want to live in, which I think is what quality homes means.
The site, having previously had religious use as a synagogue and a church, there was a sense that there was a sort of history of community use, and they would like to see that retained. So as Kyle said, that process is still going on with BeFirst, but we think it makes really a lot of advantages of this extraordinary corner site onto the road. We also, through that process, met a lot of people who were really active in the community and wanted to take it on, so I know that they're in touch with the council. The other thing that we felt about the site when we originally were given the red line boundary is that the play street that you can see on the site was not included, and working with BeFirst, we challenged that and asked to push the red line boundary out. And it does a couple of really important things. It links the school with the housing along what was always called Play Street, or Schoolway, sorry. And it also enabled us to create a route into the middle of this block, so thereby opening up the opportunity to have two villas, we're calling them, and enter from the inside.
When we were invited by BeFirst to submit a competition entry for this project, the very first thing we did was we went to the Valence Archive, which is just up the road, which is this kind of amazing treasure trove of all of the hand-painted, actually, layouts of the Becontree Estate. I think the thing that came through was actually the kind of sense of pride and belonging that people had about the Becontree Estate. So there were all these kind of news cuttings in there, and actually whilst I was in there was a group of elderly people who were going through and archiving all of these, and it was actually felt more like a kind of community centre than an archive. And I think we were really keen in the design of this building to tap into that really strong sense of identity that is in the Becontree Estate, and in which obviously the architecture is really a big part of that story. And I think in a way to try and design something that resonated with the fondness that people have of the Becontree estate. So the estate itself was originally laid out loosely on garden city principles. So you have these big wide avenues like the one outside, which then kind of go into these meandering roads that come off the bigger avenues. And all of that is interspersed with lots of green spaces. So particularly at the corners, you get these corners kind of opening up with views through, and with this kind of moment of greenery that just sort of really helps soften the whole estate, I think. And we were really keen to build on that in the design of this building, which I think was conceived as two villas sitting on this kind of landscaped corner between Schoolway here and Becontree Avenue running along here. The estate itself, people may know, was built in the Neo-Georgian style. Certainly, when I was an architecture student, Neo-Georgian was this kind of dirty word that nobody wanted to be accused of being Neo-Georgian. But actually, when you get into it, it's a really sort of fascinating style, because it's got this sort of very pared back detailing with the things like the arches, the round windows, triangular windows. And it's really a kind of very English, or it seemed at the time as a very English take on continental modernism. But I think what was also really interesting about it is that what the London County Council architects were trying to do was to make a deliberate stylistic break with the Victorian architecture that had come before and the kind of Victorian laissez-faire attitude to social care. So it was really about the state taking on that responsibility for housing people after World War I, and that was sort of really embedded in the architecture. So I guess where the LCC architects had wanted to make that stylistic break, we actually had wanted to, with Victorian architecture, we had wanted to deliberately make a continuation with the Neo-Georgian. And I think, because we were very clear that there's this very exciting moment, I think, going on right now, where local authorities are building again for the first time in a long time. And there are lots of amazing one-offs about that, about the proportion of housing being built by different groups, but there's a real sort of uptick in local authority housing, of which this project is part. In many ways, the building is a continuation of what Becontree represents. So the kind of the big low roofs, the dormer windows, we have some round windows, and really the intention is all about creating a building that feels at home in its surroundings.
So obviously we can look around the estate and pick up some clues about the architecture and the character of the place, but there are very many apartment types to look at. As I mentioned earlier, there aren't many apartment buildings built at a similar time in the estate. The challenge was to take that character and upscale it into a higher density version. And in some ways, I quite like the feeling of this as a sort of supersized house in many ways. But we also took clues from other LCC buildings like the Osselson estate in Camden, which is a really, really nice building. It's got a kind of scaled up civic quality in housing. But also we had to manage the density and I suppose manage the expectation of the neighbours and local people, because this is the largest building in the area, not as large as a lot of BeFirst developments. So as Kyle said, we have a large sloping roof on this side of the building, which really translates from the height of some of the shops over there to the low nursery on the other side. And we had some neighbours who were concerned about the scale, and what we did was show them the 3D model and how their views would not be affected because of the large roof. And I suppose what we felt the pressure of, you talked about this history of the architecture design, and in fact there were 91 housing types in Becontree when it was built, and we'd like to think that this is perhaps the 92nd type going up the scale.
What you'll be able to see is how, in a way, the external form of the building also translates into some quite characterful internal spaces. So I mentioned the round windows, which I think are a very nice way to kind of frame the views, particularly from the top flats, where you get this amazing. It's a very flat area here, and what George Topham Forrest, who was the rather flamboyantly named architect of the Becontree estate, did was actually create a sort of topography of the roof lines. So you see all the eaves go up and down all over the place, and it makes for quite a kind of amazing roofscape. So especially for a round window. So the dormers, again, that's something that's sort of borrowed from, you can see the buildings over the road, got these dormer windows. But what they become in lots of the flats is actually a kind of really nice place to sit and have breakfast, and just, I think, really enjoy that moment at home. That's what homes are about ultimately, is people living in them and living well in them. We've got lots of bedrooms as well that sit in the eaves. So I think they've got a sort of character that's perhaps quite unusual for public housing, and hopefully something that will be enjoyed and appreciated by residents. So all of the flats are above nationally prescribed space standards, but around 10%. And I think simple moves that we try to do, like filling the flats with daylight. So actually all of the flats are triple aspect in this development. It's 100% triple aspect. And you'll see how bright they are and how much daylight you get into them. We've tried wherever possible to bring daylight directly into the hallways, so that when you walk into the flat, you're not walking into a sort of dark space, but you're walking into a light-filled space. And the hall actually becomes almost like a kind of another room in the house. They're also quite wide, so you can fit furniture in them. That thing of having somewhere to put your keys when you come in, I think it's really a really nice kind of moment. We put balconies as well. They're all inset balconies, and they often sit between a bedroom and a living space. And what that does is it means that you can see through between spaces, and they feel larger than they are. So just always think about that kind of sense of space and try to, make these homes feel as comfortable and large as possible. I think the last thing to say is just about energy performance. So the scheme is actually not far off Passive House in terms of its fabric. And I think that's something that we're all having to think about more and more with the climate emergency, but also I think in terms of the very important consideration of residents' energy costs. I think this is something that's going to become more and more important. The scheme is heated by air source heat pumps and also with underfloor heating. I think that in combination with the fabric is going to make them very comfortable places to live.
Our senior leadership team, it really trickles down, and there's a real culture of high quality innovation and a drive for sustainability. And we're all facing challenges: increased cost of living, as Kyle said, inflation, material labour shortages, regulation change. These are things we're all going through, and kind of putting a stop to being able to easily develop high quality designs. But we also have some unique challenges at BeFirst as well. So we're responsible for delivering a profit to the council every year. We have some of the lowest land values in London, and we retain all of our stock in perpetuity. So we don't sell any of our homes. We have some private rent homes, but we don't have a cross-subsidy model at the moment. We set up a design team at BeFirst about 18 months ago, and we're now 8 people strong. So we're made up of architects, urban designers. We also have landscape and sustainability expertise. We also have our own architect and contractor framework, and we find it really useful to work with the same consultants and contractors often, so we can benefit from lessons learned, do things better next time. And we've recently set up a local authority design working group, so there's a few members here today, but we meet fortnightly to discuss kind of challenges we're facing, to share knowledge and expertise and talk about best practice. So if anybody else here is interested in joining, let me know. And that's it really. If you have any questions, come and find one of us and ask us. But yeah, thanks for coming.